Good morning, everyone. This is Mr. Tran here. Just starting you guys off with the lesson today. Hopefully by now you guys should have attempted to do problems 4-22, the questions on that problem at least. And you're only watching this video after you have finished and after your group has answered the questions, and you're using this to check your work. Okay, so let's just start it out here. 4.1.3, we're still continuing from yesterday's lesson, and we're using the same patterns that you guys learned we're using the past couple of days, these 4 tile patterns here. And remember, we talked yesterday about what these patterns look like for figure 0 and figure 4, how it grows, and then ultimately what the equations are. So we're just going to go here and we're going to jump straight to 4-22. 4-22 requires this resource page right here, which you guys should have already gotten. It looks like this right here. And we're just going to answer the following questions, okay? So when we're answering these questions, we're focusing on these right here. It says make sure you have a rule for each pattern. And then we're going to complete the table for each of those rules. And then more importantly, we're going to create the graph for each one of these patterns, okay? And we're going to see how everything ties in together and how the growth appears in the pattern, the table, the graph, and in the rule. Okay? And then we're going to see what connections there are between these representations. Okay, so let's just jump right in here and fill in these values. We actually started creating this table when we were doing the problems. Okay, so if you look at figure pattern 1 here, if you recall, we had 2, 6, 10, 14, and 18. And that's just counting the tiles that were in each figure number. Okay, let's change the color here. And for pattern number 2, we had 1, 5, 9, 13, and 17. Okay, moving on, I'm going to change a new color. Pattern 3, this is 3, 7, 11, 15, and 19. Okay, and then the last one here for pattern 4, we have 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Okay, so again, I already gave you guys, or you guys came up with the equations yourselves from yesterday. So it really should not be anything new per se, but let's just go over it one more time. As on your handout, you should see that you're going to have a y equals, and we're going to make this right side the rule side, okay? So we talked about it yesterday, how many tiles are being added every single time, okay? And we discussed that this is going to be adding a 4, okay? And hopefully by now, you and your group discussed, as we did yesterday, that that 4 is this 4 right here. This is the growth rate. This is how much it's growing every single time, okay? And then there's always going to be that second number right here. That second number, again, we talked about it yesterday. We're going to look for how many tiles are in the 0th term, okay? Or in the 0th figure, excuse me. So we go find figure 0, and we see that it has 2 tiles. So I'm going to write right there, 4x, and then we write plus 2. And there's your equation, y equals 4x plus 2. We're going to repeat that same process for all of the remaining patterns. Okay, so the second one, it's going to be y equals, again, we're looking at how many is being added each time, how many tiles are being added, and we see that it's a plus 4. Okay, so we're going to write 4x. Again, that number happens to be 4 again. Okay, and then how do we find this number right here? Hopefully you guys remember, we're looking at figure number 0. And how many tiles are in figure number 0 here? Well, it's simple. When you have a table, you just look at your table. We have 1, so I'm going to write plus 1. Okay, then we're going to move on to the next one. Again, same thing. It's increasing by, you guessed it, 4 again. So it's going to be y equals 4x, and then figure 0 has 3 tiles. Okay, then we get to the last one here. Again, how many is it growing by? From 9 to 11, I'm adding 2, so it's going to be a 2x. This is going to be the only one that's different from the other 3. where the growth rate is actually 2. It's adding 2 tiles every time I increase. And then I find my 0th figure, and it has 3 tiles, so I write +3. And there you have it. Those are the 4 rules, one for each pattern. Okay, so now it's time to graph those. Okay, so when we graph it, we're just going to go to the second part of your paper. And so in order to move on, I have to erase this. So make sure you guys have all of this filled out. And again, if you don't, just press pause in this video. But let me go back up here. I emphasize growth rate, and the other thing was tiles in figure 0. Okay, tiles in figure 0. Make sure you guys write those 2 things. That's how we come up with the equation. We find the growth rate, and we find the tiles in figure 0. Okay, so right now would be a good time to pause. Make sure you have everything copied. All right, so right now we're going to go ahead and plot those points. We're going to make a graph, and so we're at the bottom half of your page now. And right now we have a blank quadrant 1 on our coordinate plane, and I'm just going to place some important numbers here when it comes to the spacing for our x and y axes. I think we have enough space here for every square to be 1. So I'm just going to go by mark every 5 squares here, so that we don't have too many numbers written down and it makes it sloppy and hard to read. Okay, so this would be a great start. Again, hopefully you're watching this video after you and your group have tried this, and you're not just coming straight here for the answer, because it's not very helpful if that's what you're doing. Okay, so again, I've marked, I think I've spaced it out correctly. We've got 5 for each, and I'm going to go ahead and start graphing tile pattern number 1. If you recall, I did it in red earlier, and the equation was y equals 4x plus 2. I'm going to plot 0, 2, 1, 6, 2, 10, 3, 14, and then 4, 18. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and connect the dots here. And I should get a graph that looks something like that. And I'm going to add an arrow. Okay, so I'm connecting the dots in this one just to make this graph look more presentable. I know we talked about in class of how, we're not going to have, this shouldn't be a continuous graph because we're not going to have part of a tile, right? We can't have 1.5 tiles or 1.83 tiles or something like that. So I'm just doing it purely for the purpose of this activity. We're going to connect the dots, so I need to make sure you guys can actually see what the graph looks like, because if you don't connect it, it looks kind of confusing. Okay, so we're going to move on to pattern number 2 now, and I'm going to use this in green, and the equation was y equals 4x plus 1. So I've got 0, 1, got 1, 5, got 2, 9, 3, 13, and 4, 17. Okay, and this is going to be an interesting looking graph because it is right next to your first one. Okay, so very similar graphs. If you notice, they have the exact same growth rate. The only difference is, and I'm not going to say it now, hopefully you guys can find the difference between the red and the green, just how different they are. Okay, so I'm going to start graphing pattern number 3. The equation is y equals 4x plus 3. That first point we have is 0, 3. Then we have 1, 7. Then we have 2, 11. And 3, 15. And then 4, 19. Okay. Now, this is also another interesting graph because they're all very similar, right? In fact, these are what we call parallel lines. So I want you guys to pause for a minute. Look at the three equations that we have, right? Y equals 4x plus 2, y equals 4x plus 1, y equals 4x plus 3. What was the same about those three equations? And then look at the graph and notice that they're all parallel. So something about those graphs, or excuse me, something about those three equations tells me that these three lines are going to be parallel. And we'll talk about that later on if you guys haven't made that discovery yet. Okay, and so the last pattern here, pattern number 4, has a slightly different equation. It's y equals 2x plus 3. So let's go ahead and plot that. And I'm going to go ahead and use the same color that I used on the previous table of purple. Okay, so the first point is 0, 3. Second point is 1, 5. Third point is 2, 7. And then third point is 3, 9. Fourth is 4, 11. So if I were to connect the dots here, this is actually poor spacing. I don't know why I did it like this. I might have to go back and change the video. Oops. Because we don't need all these numbers on our x-axis. I did this without thinking ahead. Okay, so you can tell right then and there, that purple line is different, right? The growth rate is different. So if you recall, this is y equals 2x plus 3, okay? The red one was our first one, is y equals 4x plus 2. And the green one is y equals 4x plus 3. That blue one, oh, excuse me. The green one is y equals 4x plus 1. The blue one was y equals 4x plus 3. Okay, look at what's the same for those three parallel lines, and how is that different from that fourth one, that purple one? Look at the equations. What's the same? What's different? Okay. So we're just gonna go ahead and pause the video right here. Again, this is not the best use of spacing. If I were to do this again, I would definitely do it differently. These numbers on the x-axis, we're not going all the way to 20 or 30, right? So it doesn't really make sense for me to do that. What I should have done is made these spaced differently, and I should have probably, because we only go up to 4 patterns, that probably should have been 1, this should have been 2, this should have been 3, this should have been 4, this should have been 5, right? So for the sake of time, I'm not going to redo the video, but if I were, that's what I would have done.